All right, folks, welcome back. We're going to be doing some work on the lathe today. I am really concerned about this banging noise, especially in 800 RPM range on the gearbox. And I have a kind of a hunch as to what it is. We're going to go ahead and get back into the cover. I've taken it off a couple times already, fumbled around in there, but we need to dig into it a little deeper and figure out what this is. And I think it might be bearing related or has something to do with the shifter fork thingies in here, which really aren't forks. They're kind of like shifter blocks. Let's go ahead and pull the cover off the top of the lathe, and I'm going to get into what I think the problem may be, and we'll do some investigatory work. Oh, it's heavy. Oh, come on, you. She's got some weight to her, kind of like me. Okay, so here's your main spindle shaft right here. You got a counter shaft over here. There's a small counter shaft down below. Where I'm pointing down there is the primary shaft, not a counter shaft. I got that wrong. We're going to see a lot more about this in part 2 of this lathe repair video series. And another counter shaft down below, but that's really for the drive, for your feeds and things like that. It's just a series of gears that come right off the spindle off of this side here. It's really not all that important. This is the one over here I'm talking about. What's important is this guy back here, this counter shaft. You may have a bearing problem. I don't know. I can't really tell. You can slide these back and forth as part of your gear ratios. For the main gear ratios over here, the 1, 2, 3, when you turn this, it simply moves a shifter fork, which is more like a shifter block down here on this shaft. There's a little gear, two gears over here. There's a small one and a bigger one, so it's a reduction. It allows you to turn a certain amount as far as the detent goes. I think the detent's up in here on the actual handle, probably like a ball and spring type deal. And then it detents into the individual position. And of course there's no synchros or anything like that, so you gotta manually manipulate it to get it to go into that position. And what's happening is when you're in the 800 RPM range, which is A3, so let's go to A3. When you're in this one right here, this thing, I can't turn it on now, it'll spray oil everywhere. But this thing will make a major bang when it comes up to RPM. Now there's a couple of issues that I see in here that could be potentially causing it. The first one is these gears are not very tight on the shaft, and this keyway here this key is loose. I mean, this key is like crappy as far as the keyway is related to the key fitment. It's pretty shitty, but I'm not really sure if that's causing it. Now you can see got a bearing over here. I know you can't see it. And a bearing in the back here. Now those things are lubricated just by spray from the gears spinning it around. Well, I think that's what's supposed to happen, but as we come to find, the bearing shields are still installed on both of these bearings on both sides of the bearing. So how is the oil supposed to spray in there and get inside the bearing with the shields installed? And how the main bearings, spindle bearings, are lubricated is you got a lubrication port over here. So this lubrication port over here for the front one, it sprays oil up, goes into this channel, it eventually migrates down into this, and the same on the one in the back here, which is slightly out of shot. There you go. So it goes down and just runs down into that spindle bearing. It's really a crappy design. There's plenty of oil up in here that it sprays around and goes into here, but it is not a great design in my opinion. I have some ideas on how to change that a little bit, but that's for another time. But I am a little concerned that it might be these bearings back here on this counter shaft. Either the rear one or the front one. But the other problem is in the shifter forks themselves. Now this is really stupid the way they do this. Kind of hard to show you, but if you move this back and forth, you see how much play we got in here? There's two places this play is coming from. It's not this pin, this roll pin, or this grub screw, which I'm not even sure what that grub screw is for. And it's not up here, it's not the handle out of shot because I checked all those. Between the top of the arm here that comes off the shaft and the little block here, which is a shifter fork, really, in reality. And you can see there's a lot of movement in there. And the movement is primarily shifter fork itself, and it fits into a hole. And I'm not sure, I can't really tell if there's a spring clip back there. I don't know what even holds that in. Otherwise it would push forward and rub against the gear. And I'm not sure that that may be happening. Or the thing is cocking around and kind of slamming itself. Because there's so much play in this thing. I mean, you can really move it. You see that? Block itself related to the arm. The other one's about the same. There's a lot of play and it's just really sloppily made. But I'm just not certain that that's the problem, because what I've done is I've fired the thing up and actually held some pressure to kind of lock it one way or the other. Use the inching button and spin it up to 800 RPM. And it does seem to do it less, but it still makes the noise. And it's between 600 and 800 RPM. Let's go to 600, which is C3. So the only difference is that this gear moved over there. So it's this shaft here. I'm convinced that the problem is in this shaft here. It's got to be. I can't think of it being anywhere else, because it's the only thing that moves back and forth. It's the variable. So I think our best bet at this point, to be honest with you, is to remove this shaft. Is just take this shaft right out and inspect the bearings in order to diagnose things. Now we're back in 800 to determine whether or not that the bearings are bad, because I can't get any play out of this if I pull on it, radially, but it doesn't mean that the bearings are not bad up in here. One of the two bearings or both. That would definitely account for loud noise when it reaches top RPM, because that's when it does it. When it comes up to its highest RPM in that particular gear, it does that bang, and I'm wondering if there is a bearing problem causing it. It's the only thing I can think of. So I got an indicator on that shaft. It's not the greatest setup here, but if I put a pry bar in, we can definitely get it to move a little bit if we're pulling up on a gear. And that's not turning the shaft at all. Now it doesn't seem like a lot, and it isn't a lot. It shouldn't be any movement whatsoever, and I'm not rotating the gear. I can feel that the gear is not turning, because sometimes you get a little deflection from the friction of the tip of your indicator, which looks like deflection as far as this way, but it isn't. It's the only thing I can find, so I think we're just going to stick with the plan and get that shaft out. It's something I can do without draining the oil. Anything lower, I have to drain the oil, and this oil is nasty. If you look down the back in particular with a flashlight, as I suspected, there's a bunch of metal and settlements. There's some little settlements down in there. People that live in oil, yeah, there's a bunch of sediment down in there too. This thing's going to get cleaned out. I'm going to flush this out with kerosene, and I think we're going to do what Artisan Makes did on his gearhead lathe. Cleaned it all out and put actual gear oil in, quieted it down. He's had no ill effects from that. I think we're going to switch this over to regular gear oil. Slight clarification on this. During editing, I reached out to Artisan Makes, and he has switched it out to a thinner oil, which is a 40 weight gear oil or a spur gear oil. But he said he's tried a couple of different grades or different thicknesses and decided that 40 or 50 weight is the best for his lathe. So we may revisit this in the future based on his findings, but for now, we're going to stick with this. All right, first things first, get these grub screws out. The regular flat pointed, they're not like dog pointed or other type of locking grub screw as well. I really don't know what their purpose is. Yeah. Come on, baby. Better. Now before I do the other one, I want to see how the shaft comes out here, because the way it looks to me is I may have to take this front cover plate off. It means I got to take the dials off, or at least the handles on the dials. And I wonder if this thing comes through. Okay, so I took the handle off. There's a ball and a spring that detents in these two little divots. Look at this crap. That is not from where. That wasn't cleaned out when they drilled it, I guaranteed. Guarantee it. What a freaking joke. That's all that junk that's at the bottom of this too is, yeah, you can see the end of the shaft here, so it's got to come out this way. We'll take this cover off. You know, you could see that crap down the back is probably not from wear. That's from manufacturing, which is why when you buy one of these lathes, you really should. I did drain it and put a fresh oil in it. You know, I did that, but yeah, I should have just flushed it all out and kerosened it and the whole bit, but you know, I didn't, and there you go. Little M3 screws, I'd say. All right, let's see what we got behind door number 1. Yeah, so this is gonna have to come off like we took this one off. It overlaps into that hole. I think this thing is probably hung up on the burr from that grub screw. We should be able to just lever that back. Oh, there's a keyway too. There's a key. Ugh, come on, baby. There we go. Get it past that spot, and she's shitting in high cotton. We'll take this key out too. Now we should come back. Oh, too much drama, I would think. I don't see a shoulder or a clip or anything up in here. This thing, I've tried probing it by tapping on the keyway, you know, this way. It's dead solid. It's hitting something dead solid. And I don't see a spring clip. I don't see, you know what? I wonder if there's a grub screw underneath here, underneath this seal that goes down into a groove or something. That might be, yep. There's a grub screw that runs down through. There's probably a groove in that shaft. They love to do that on machine tools and put a little grub screw like that. See, there's the hole. Son of a. There you go. Son of a. There it comes. There we go. Yep, see the groove? Come on, baby. Getting the shifter shaft off now. Oh, there's an O-ring in here. Cool. All faith is not gone from Grizzly that they have an O-ring. All right, so here's the shifter. Yeah, there is a circlip on the back of it, but well, that's not too bad actually, but the width of this is insanely wide for that gear. I mean, it's allowing it to do this. My theory initially was because it's allowing it to go like this so much, you can see a bunch of wear on one side of it there. And maybe it's clanking, you know, grabbing, and there is some wear on the sides where the shifter block may be doing that, but
that's bullshit.
You know, it just doesn't look all that bad. Huh. Yeah, okay, I'm pleased to see it's got O-rings on it. That's amazing. I'm gonna go ahead and do the other one off camera, and then we're gonna work on getting that shaft out. All right, since we're free of the shifter block forks, whatever you wanna call them, this thing spins pretty good. It's a little bindy, and it's got like a tight spot. It's loose there, looser, a little bit further, and it binds up right there. 3 bolts, cap bolts, hold this cover on. I'm assuming there's got to be some sort of a seal in here or an O-ring or something. This one is not below the oil line. It should be fine. But like I said earlier, we are getting rid of this oil. How do you get this out? Yeah, freaking, oh, there it goes. It's coming. Ha. Ha ha. You just stick something in it and pry. That's what she said. Oh, come on. Fucking jackass thing. Yeah, there's a gasket in here. I'm gonna try not to rip it. Yeah, come off okay. All right, I got you on your favorite spot on the tailstock. Well, I guess I could take the cap off the back side. It's only 2 bolts. Looks like we can, I'm not sure if we can tappy tap tap and it'll push the shaft out against the race, the inner race. I don't like that, but if it isn't that tight, it'll be okay. Let's try Mr. Bob D, which is big old brass drift. We'll just tap her from the, tappy tap tap from the back side and see what happens. And nothing happens because, oh, we got some thrust now though. Yeah, so we are definitely moving that bearing. In other words, the shaft is moving end to end a little bit, I think. Okay, well, I've tried a couple of different pullers to try to push this thing out. I just don't have the room back there. It's too close to that big pulley. So I said, screw it. And I got the ball peen and that same big brass drift. And oh, you know what? I assumed there was a shoulder in these bores. There is not. Bearings just go in through, and apparently the caps are what aligns them. So there is no shoulder. So I'm pushing the whole damn thing out, the rear bearing and everything. Fine with me. There we go. Now you're probably asking yourself, what next? Because we got to get a bearing off here. Well, I got a puller for this. So we can pull a bearing off of one end. 3-inch puller, but it takes a 12 mil wrench to drive it. What's up with that shit? Oh, wow. These are on there tight. Oh, wow. You wouldn't need that kind of a press fit on these. This, absolutely not. I figured that would be an interference fit at best. Yeah, that's a tight fucking fit. Got it. I mean, I don't know if this is going to solve the problem, to be honest with you. But there's no question that that bearing's got some play in it. Does it have a lot of play? No. The other one feels good, so we're going to go ahead and find a bearing for this one. I can always run down to Sarasota to Bearings Marketing. We'll get the whole shaft out now. Give you the shaft. As I said before, this bearing, perfectly fine. 6004Z, or 5500? 6004Z. That's perfectly fine. So this is just slides on over the keyway, over the key rather. That's not all wore out. That's machined just the way it's machined. So, you know, as far as it being loose on the key here, I mean, just the way it is. But it slides up and down on this shaft very nicely. So, you know, I don't really, ooh, that's strangely satisfying. So I really don't think that there's a problem with that. But this is the spindle side. And so this is the one that gives the most force, or gets the most force from the spindle as far as when you're cutting some steel or something. In other words, it's got the most pressure on it as far as this bearing goes, because this is directly powering through either this gear being in one particular place or another, or this very gear itself, with even the low speed going directly to the spindle on this one. Either way, it's this counter shaft is powering the spindle. This is the spindle side of the shaft, ergo it would make sense that that bearing would be a little bit more strained and thus bigger. But I don't, like I said, I don't know if that's causing the problem, but it certainly could. If there's enough play in there as it spins up in RPM, it could be binding really and then releasing, something like that, but impossible to say. I can't find anything else, so even remotely suggestive of another problem. So this would be the only thing that I can actually find now. So we'll just replace the bearing. I'm not exactly sure how we're going to do that because it's pressed on, but we'll polish these off a little bit with some emery and maybe get a little bit easier press on that. It really should just be a tappy tap tap fit, because once it's in place, it's up against these shoulders, both of these bearings. And then you have caps on the outside. Where's it going to go? It doesn't need to be that press fitted. Plus the bearing itself is fairly snug in that bore. All right, a couple hours later, we're back from a couple of errands. Went to a Bearings Marketing down in Sarasota. Took the dog, he enjoyed the ride. Picked up some KBC bearings, but FAG is a good bearing brand, and I think we'll have good life out of these. This is a 6304Z, and the other one is the 6004Z, both KBC obviously. Now here's the thing with these bearings, and this is probably the reason why we had problems with these. And I reiterate, I'm not sure if this is the problem that we're having with the lathe, but it's the only evidence that I have at this point. The problem with these bearings are they're shielded on both sides. This is kind of a splash oil system There's absolutely no reason to have shields on both sides, especially when you have a cover that goes over the end, you know, with a gasket, you know, like this. Here's a cover with a gasket. There's no reason for having that, and there wasn't virtually any oil inside those cavities on the other side, the outside of the bearing. There should have been. But with these shields on, you're not going to really get a whole lot of oil into them. Not without pressurization, and even then, like in a pressurized motorcycle engine, when you have a roller bearing like this, you have at least one, if not both sides, opened up. So it has flood oil capability from the oil galleries or however it gets oiled. So we have to consider that when we put these in. So I'm going to off camera go over to the other bench. I'm going to pop out one of these shields on both of these new bearings and make sure those are toward the inside. I'm cleaning up the bores that these press into. I'd like to measure them first to see what the design crush is. Because I tell you right now, the surface finish on one of those bores on the big bearing, it sucks. I'll show you that here in a second, but I'll get you set back up properly and then we'll go ahead and measure that and take a look at that. All right, I'll show you the surface finish here first. That's bored terribly. There's chatter in it and it's very, very rough. Anyway, I want to measure it and see what it is because I think that'll help us understand how much of a push it's going to need. But I can tell you right now, this bore is not round. Tighter side to side than it is up and down. Yeah, but that is going to get us close enough. 2.047 and up and down is 2.048. So let's go take a look at the bearing, the new bearing, and see what that is. Well, this is where I would expect it to be, 2.047. Why is the damn thing so damn tight? I mean, there's no clearance, so that really is, almost by definition, an interference fit. But that sumbitch was in there, 2.047, same reading. So it should almost want to slip in, said the wife. I'm going to just kind of clean up the bores a little bit more and try to get them a little smoother, polish them. Then we're going to get to figuring out how we're going to get this in. I also have to do these, just kind of clean them up. We'll get it installed essentially in reverse order of how it was removed. Okay, this is about ready to go. These diameters here, these two sides of these journals are exactly the same size, diameter-wise. Not that it makes much of a difference, but I did measure these up as well just with the caliper. It's about 1.5 thou crush on this, which is what I would expect on it. So this is the part that's going to be a little bit tricky on the front one to get this on. But on the back one, we'll use the press. So again, this one's done, and so is the inside of the lathe as far as the headstock goes for all the gears and the oil and stuff. Now, this one sucks when it comes to draining the oil out of it. You have to take this plug out right here, and I'll get to more on this plug here in a second. It gets everywhere. And so I did drain the oil out and captured as much as I could without it spilling. Of course, some of it did. This is where it's at now, but it's very difficult on the before pictures to show you all the crap that was down the bottom here. Now once I drained it out, I got another clip or two where you could see it a lot better. And once you can see that, you can see all the shit that was in here. So that at that stage of things, I just wiped it out really well and then went in with some kerosene. This is the last kerosene I think we have in Manatee County. I went to Tractor Supply. That is the last gallon they had, you know, with this cold snap, everybody with their kerosene heaters. I didn't think of that, but I just needed something to clean with. This is a pain in the ass, and I need to modify this for changing the gear oil. But this is not a standard pipe thread because I do have a fitting that I can make something out of right here. That's the same size basically, but it's wrong. This is simply a M16 by 1.25 tapped thread. It just doesn't go in all the way, so it kind of mimics a pipe thread. And I put some thread sealer on it, and that's it. Now I don't think there's any metric, I never heard of a metric pipe thread, but it could, I guess one could exist. Definitely 1.25, and it's definitely 16, definitely 16 millimeter. We'll single point some threads on a little piece of brass or something, or maybe use that bronze, and we'll make ourselves a fitting that takes a plug on the outside of it so it sticks out. Have something that we can actually dump oil and it doesn't go everywhere. And all ready to go, as I said, after doing all the shit inside here. And I got these bores as good as they're gonna get. I took the shield off the inside. Yeah, there's some grease in there, who cares? It'll get all washed away with the oil that's in there. Or the oil that's going in there shortly, which ain't the same shit that came out. Okay. I have no idea what I'm doing. Drop this down through there without no bearing on it or anything. That's the front one. Okay, so here's what we need to do. We need to get that bearing on both this shaft and in that bore. The one in the back is already on the shaft, as you saw. It was pressed in the press, and it's already probably halfway into this bore. The main problem is we're going to have to put a lot of force on this, like in other words, tapping it in on the shaft to get it on the center of the shaft. In other words, the inner race of that bigger bearing is a lot harder of a press than it is into the bores. And that means we're going to be putting a significant amount of force here. And what stops it from going all the way through when we're tapping both of them? Because we have, tapping this end rather, we're pushing the whole thing through and this bearing's just going to come out. So I said, why not just do that? Why not just right now just tap it through and have that bearing come out? I'm going to go ahead and just start this bearing on the outside, and we're just going to start lining stuff up. And if I can get this thing squared up pretty good, and then just line this up to it and start both sides at the same time. In other words, it'll start back here in the bore and then start into the center there. Maybe we can play one against the other and not necessarily do damage on one or the other, because this is just absolutely a really crappy way to do this. I mean, it's real. I gotta take this chuck off too. This chuck's in the way. Hang on. Like this. Try to get it squared up most of the way, if not all the way. I have no clue how they did this at the factory. I really don't know. Pushing the old ones out, rather, not a big deal. Do it however. But putting the new ones in, you got to do that right. These bores are basically junk. I mean, the way they've been machined is pretty sad. Now that's in pretty far, but I think it's pretty square. Gotta be. So what I'm thinking now is I'll bring you back up to the top. I got these things on correctly. So I'm just putting some 3-in-1 oil on it to help it out. Now this has got to go over on this side of it like that, because otherwise it can't go back and forth. And then this one goes between the 3 in the back here. You can't really see what I'm talking about, but trust me. That one lines up to that like it's supposed to. That one lines up to that, so we know we got it right. Actually, I should be hitting this from the outside of it, but I can't get anything on it because of the fact that that damn pulley's in the way. I should have just taken that stupid pulley off, I guess. Well, it is going in. That's bitching. I don't think it's pushing that out at all, which I'm really surprised with. Okay, yeah, now we're starting to come out on the front one. So let's go back around here. I don't think this one moved either because it's got enough friction on it to keep it happy. Well, that's not bad. Huh. Okay. Now we'll keep this one moving in. All right, here's the rear cap. You see how fat that is? That is really thick. Okay, the cap's on the back. So let's drive this one home. Yep, we're seated all the way. It is super smooth. I mean, I really like that a lot. You know, this looks about right because there's a lot of play in that keyway. Cool. Okay, so here's the back end. So that's all set. I just got to put the cap in on the front, and this is pretty much done. And that's about all the time I have for today, so we'll pick this up tomorrow. But yeah, I know, a little drama there, but you know, that's how I roll. Man, I don't know. I don't know what the hell I'm doing, and I just don't want to destroy these bearings. Not that they were like priceless or anything like that. They were reasonable. I think I paid like 30 bucks for the 2 bearings. That's chump change. We'll get back to it tomorrow because, like I said, I am out of time. All right, we're looking good as far as all back together. Shifter forks are back in. These are pinned in place. They're not keyed in place. They are specific to the side. I didn't mark these, but I remembered that this left one had a different angle than the right one relative to where the pin goes through and the set screw. I remember this was offset here. So I got these right. What I didn't get right at first was these gears right here. The shifter shaft gear, you have to clock that to get it in a position. When the detent ball bearing back there is in its appropriate hole, you won't be able to get it on the individual either letter or number here unless this thing is clocked properly, the smaller gear. So you pull the smaller gear out and then you get the thing lined up to where A is A and B is B and so forth, and 1, 2, 3 as well. If you're going to take something like this apart, you definitely want to number or just mark them, you know, left or right, or 1 and 2, whatever you want to do. Because I didn't do that. I assumed that they're exactly the same, and they are very, very close. Those grub screws down inside here that go down in, they're dog point grub screws actually, that line up to these shafts, that groove in the shaft to keep it in line. You can't tighten them all the way down because then the shaft won't turn. So they're only supposed to stick the little dog point into the groove in the shaft. So what I did was I backed them up with another grub screw. I have a kit of stainless grub screws, and they're all it's a metric kit. So I brought it down, backed it off a little bit, and then put a grub screw on top of it. That's really the way this should have been done. It keeps that lower grub screw from moving. That's almost always the case on a machine tool or something else where you have a locating grub screw that doesn't affix something or fixture something. You got to have a grub screw on top of it to lock that in place. And we are good to go. We are changing our lubricant over to gear oil, 80W90 gear oil. Which is absolutely not rated for this. What you're supposed to use is, it's either ISO 68 or ISO 32, because it's different from the apron to the gear head, but I don't remember which is which. I found it. It's right there. So the headstock is supposed to be ISO 32 or equivalent, 3.5 quarts. We're going to change that to gear oil. Because other people have done it. I've seen it on YouTube videos and gearhead lathes and read about it on forums and stuff. The only concern I had with this is because it's a splash oil system and because you have to rely on the oil splashing up into this groove, into this entire groove that goes around the top underneath the headstock cover. So there's enough clearance down below this lip to the seal to allow oil to splash up inside there. And eventually it accumulates quite quickly. Actually, this thing sprays the shit out of oil. I tried turning this on even a low RPM one time not too long ago just to see what would happen as far as what the gears were doing. And because that back gear spins at the same RPM it always does with the motor, it just threw oil everywhere. I mean, halfway across the workshop. So this definitely slings some oil. These two ports right here have a little copper like nozzle that is only about maybe 10 or 12 mil deep, and that is what kind of directs the oil down that hole that leads to the main spindle bearings, which I'm going to have to assume, because it's a spindle bearing, are tapered rollers. So they're not in the same situation as we had with a regular radial roller bearing Yeah, it's a better shot right there. You can see there's no shield on it, nor is the one over there have a shield on it, because we want oil to be splashing up into there. Well, it just kind of drains down through these holes, and because gear oil is a little thicker, I was concerned about that as far as it running down. So yesterday off camera, I took this old awl I got and ran it inside these guys and kind of wallered them out and spread them out. They were a little bit on the narrow side. Just did this, and you can look down them and see that they are really, really open now. Piece de resistance test is, I'm gonna just dribble some gear oil up in here. You can see when you have gear oil over this, it goes right down there without any hesitation, and it does so on this side as well. So when this thing's full of oil, it's going to run down inside the spindle bearings without too much trouble. And what it does is just comes out in the inside, goes back into the main circulation. I don't believe we're going to have any problem with main spindle bearing lubrication with using a slightly thicker oil. Usually it's not cold down here. It is right now, but it isn't usually very hot. So even with the AC on in here in the summertime, it's going to be pretty warm. And this stuff is not going to be like a manual transmission vehicle sitting outside in 25-degree weather. And so this stuff's going to flow just fine. And I think it's going to really help quiet this thing down and maybe give us some better longevity on these bearings. So. And if we eat spindle bearings up, then we're just going to have to replace them and maybe do that in the future. But I do not believe that's going to be the case. And we are just going to fill her up and run it. Not right now, but we'll run it once we get the cover back on, which is going to be really soon. And that's 4 quarts right there. Yeah, 4 quarts took us right to the sight glass. All right, so I'm going to get this all back together off camera. You saw it come apart, so you don't really need to see it go back together. And then we'll fire it up, see how it sounds. Well, folks, we have not fixed it. In some ways it's worse, some ways it's better. Before I pull the top cover off, I'm just going to run it here just for a few seconds and see if it makes the noise again. And I think I narrowed it down to near where we were working, but not exactly those bearings. So let me see if this will work. We'll go to 800. I'm sure it'll work, but I don't want to blow anything up. Again. I hear that, it kind of hung up and then kicked in. And I think that's the thickness of the oil that's exacerbating it. So in a way, it helped me out because it's kind of a diagnostic thing. And where I'm getting that from, it's this bearing pack in here where the main pulleys go in from the motor. You know, that would be understandable considering those are under tension all the time from belt tension. You know, I think it's this bearing pack in there. So the oil level, unfortunately, at normal levels is higher than that. So I've drained enough off, I believe, where we can pull that off. I don't know if I'll do this now or get into it in another video. We'll make that decision here in a little bit. We might do a part 2 on this and see what the issue is. But so far, I mean, I like it with the thicker oil as far as it quiets it down, but I'm pretty sure it's the bearings on the main spindle input. I'll film as we go along and we'll decide whether or not to put it in this video or another one. I think we're going to go ahead and do that. Let's cut it off part 1. Let's call this part 1. There'll be a part 2 on this repair. We're definitely getting deep on this because now I got to get into that counter shaft, if you will, the drive counter shaft, and pull that out and see what's going on with those bearings. And I think really that's the main cause. But since the counter shaft for shifting, you know, the gear counter shaft and that shaft for the motor drive sit right next to each other, you can see why my initial thought was that that's where the noise was coming from there. That's what the problem was in that counter shaft. I was thinking that maybe the motor drive shaft would be a problem as far as that small counter shaft goes because of the fact that there's always the belt tension on it. And I do have the belts pretty tight right now. They're not excessively tight. So we'll just take it apart in part 2 and hopefully get this thing completely resolved. So stick around for that. All right, so as always, thanks for watching. Don't just repair, restore. We'll catch you on that next video.